Welcome back to 100 Days of Nice. In this video, we are going to be talking about grief, more specifically, ambiguous loss. What is ambiguous loss? I learned about this concept during my training as a therapist, and it was termed by Dr. Pauline Boss. If Feel free to Google it if you are interested in learning more. I'm looking at notes from a presentation I saw her do back in 2013, and I want to share a couple of her bullets describing what it is. She describes ambiguous loss as a loss that remains unclear and thus has no closure. A loss that has no official verification. It can't be clarified, cured, or fixed. The loss can be physical or psychological, but the incongruence lies between the absence and the presence. So, what do we mean by that? You can experience ambiguous loss when you are grieving something that may, or someone that may be physically present, but psychologically absent. So that might look like living with someone who is suffering from an addiction or abuse of substances. They're physically there, but like them, they're not there. What you are experiencing when you interact with them, what you see them, are the effects of the substance or are the effects of the drug. If you're living with someone that's struggling with a mental health disorder, they're physically there, but psychologically they're not present. What you're finding yourself experiencing with are the traumas that they continue to relive, or perhaps the depression, or the hallucinations, or the delusions, etc., etc. An example of physical absence and psychological presence is those of us that are part of military families and our family members are psychologically still present with us, but they're physically miles and miles and miles and miles away. So we live in a two-parent home, but there's only one parent that's going to the games or showing up to the conferences or helping with the homework or preparing the meals, etc., etc. We also have this similar experience when families are experiencing incarceration or when there are issues with migration and deportation. Those are just a few examples. So, the way this all connects to my emotional intelligence is that I realized we have, if you've been watching my videos, you've noticed I've been talking about emotions of sadness. I've been talking about having experiences of depression and just feeling low energy. I did a video talking about feeling heavy, and I noticed that it is important and helpful to be even more specific. The more specific we can be with our emotions, the more clear we can be when addressing what the need and is, so that we're able to move forward, so that we're able to ride that emotional wave. And one other layer of it that I realized in sitting with that emotion was that this was an experience of grief. This was an experience of ambiguous loss. So the nurturing self-talk of the day was, I must create ways to grieve this ambiguous loss. How did I do that? The integrity practice was first naming it, being able to acknowledge, like, oh, this is what it is. Like, yeah, I'm not just sad or I'm not just feeling low energy. Like, I am experiencing ambiguous loss. I need to grieve. And that's where step two comes in, the honoring it through that process of grieving, through acknowledging that, yes, this is a process that deserves to be had. And then the third step that I used in my integrity practice was learning from it and choosing to integrate it into the now. And I've seen this happening so much online on social media that it's just like boosting my hopefulness, because many of us are experiencing. Oh, there was one more thing I wanted to share from her presentation, that this was back from 2013, and I'm like, this perfectly describes what so many of us are experiencing right now in the middle of this social distancing. We, many of us, not all of us, but many of us are feeling a loss of control over our lives right now. True or not? A lot of us are feeling on edge. We're experiencing this sense of not knowing, like when, or even if things are ever going to get back to what we considered to be normal. Many of us are in limbo. We feel like we're frozen in place. I know I've been feeling a lot of these things. Another way that she described it as feeling loss of trust in the world as a fair and rational place. Well, actually, since the beginning of this whole thing, that I'm sure you could have noticed on your timelines as well as probably within your social circles, there were a lot of people that have been side-eyeing this whole thing, that have been questioning whether this is even real or not. When I'm referring to this, I'm referring to the virus itself, and there have been conspiracy theories coming up left and right. And so this has awakened for many people a loss of trust in the world and in the way that we, as societies, as countries, as governments, are choosing to respond to this virus. Another point that she described that I think perfectly describes what many of us are going through is a loss of dreams. Many of us were dreaming of things that we were going to be able to do right now that we're not doing. And then that also often results in a loss of hope for the future. And for some people, that has been their experience as well. And the last point that she shared that I think perfectly relates to what we're experiencing right now is a loss of identity. Many of our identities are wrapped up in our professions, in our jobs, and many of us are now without jobs. Who am I? What am I doing? When am I even going to be able to do what I know how to do so well again? And really struggling with that. So, all of these things are examples and expressions of ambiguous loss. And so, it's important for us to be able to name it as that and honor it as that, because it's not just being sad, or it's not just being down, or it's not just feeling hopeless. Like, we have lost something. We have lost things physically, we have lost things financially, we have lost things psychologically as well. We have lost things that were, and we have also lost things that were to be. What I mean by that is many of our students at the elementary, high school, college, graduate levels lost the ability to celebrate all of the hard work and the hundreds of hours of studying and preparing, have lost the ability to celebrate it in the traditional way. And this is where step 3 comes in, that it has revived a sense of hopefulness and joy within me. Is I love seeing the resilience of the human spirit, because that learning and integrating, it's like, okay, we know that we're sad about this loss, that we're grieving this loss, and we know that what we've lost, it fulfilled this function. It met this need, it had this purpose. So, how can we integrate that with the reality of the now? How can we integrate that into the present? And so we're seeing a lot of people doing watch parties, a lot of people celebrating their birthdays with like multiple people on FaceTime, so we could still see the baby boy blow out his cake and he could still hear his whole family sing happy birthday off key, or we can still celebrate these moments of graduation and anniversaries and things along those lines. I've been loving seeing even like girlfriends coming together online and doing like the don't rush challenge, and so you're still able to like doll up and have fun with your friends, although you're not able to do that physically and go out and enjoy all of that together. But it's still like this fulfilled this need, and this need is worthy of being met. It's necessary to meet it. So, how can we integrate that previous practice in any way that we can with the reality of the now. So, that is the integrity practice. The C I want to focus on today is the compassion. And it's okay. It's okay, and just give myself permission. And I want to encourage each of you to give yourself permission to experience all of these ups and downs, to know that it's okay to grieve this loss. And it's difficult to grieve this kind of loss because it's ambiguous, it's not clear, it is nuanced, and there isn't like a final end date. And so it makes it difficult to be able to have quote unquote closure. And I already shared what the E was. That was the emotional intelligence, and that was the experience of grief. And when we grieve, we need to honor that what was, what we thought was to be, and figure out ways to integrate it into, learn from it and integrate it into our now. That gives us the space we need to be able to create something anew. And that was what was especially helpful for me as well. Because once I was like, oh, that's what I was so sad about. That's what I was grieving. Then I was able to honor it and say, okay, well, that clearly has gone. It's no longer a possibility. And I will still honor and remember it in these ways moving forward. And what am I going to focus on in the now to honor it and still create anew? So be kind to yourself. Allow that niceness to overflow into others. And I'll see you in the next video. Take care.